right. Good morning. It's 10:19 a.m. I woke up at around 8. Um, Made some breakfast. Got some coffee. So now I just want to finish up on what I wrote from last night. So usually I just tend to read over what I wrote the night prior. So we're gonna do just that. So generally, the readings for this week have urged me to think about the ways in which schools have misunderstood the process of writing. Kind of want to change that. I feel like if I can say something much quicker, I will. I would change it to just say it like simpler. Yeah. Whoops. After last week's readings, I've kept thinking about how much we don't understand about the writing process. Yeah, I'll do the same thing. Largely, this is because of the fact that, let's make that shorter. This is due to as Moffat mentions, writing is a manifestation of thought. Of course, as he also mentions, give me 1 second. Sorry, I had to use a nasal spray because I have allergies. So, largely this is due to, as Moffat mentions, writing is a manifestation of thought. Of course, as he also mentions, it is impossible to understand that the teaching of writing in America if one does not realize that in one form or another, from first grade through graduate school, it serves mostly to test writing. In effect, the way we teach writing in classrooms largely ignores the utility of writing as a tool that materializes thought. Rather, writing seems to be used as a way to test knowledge of the material within a given context, in this case classrooms, not to challenge or build on them, to demonstrate understanding. This practice, as a result, seems to be responsible for the nature of bad writers. As Campbell notes, there are largely two processes for composition, knowledge telling and knowledge transforming. School, for the most part, reinforces the former rather than the latter. In my experience, at least, as I mentioned in my commentary last week, teachers treat writing as a way to have their ideas recorded by the student, when ideally we should, I think, have students write for their own sake. What I mean by that is that we should teach students to learn how to struggle with their thoughts in order to create meaning. When students begin to engage with the materials of the classroom, their thoughts struggle with the material that they are being exposed to. This goes for any student, as with Smith. As the Smith reading mentions, basic writing students aren't the only ones who have difficulty thinking. Students across all levels and disciplines struggle with the king. The kind of thinking demanded of them in their college courses. And I mentioned that I forgot what I want to talk about when I mentioned Guy. I remember now. I was thinking over it while I was having breakfast. So Guy mentions that in his What is Literacy reading, in his What is Literacy text, he mentions that there's such thing as a dominant literacy, and what that means is that it's kind of akin to the metacognition idea, that and sort of like the being aware that you have a voice in Jessica Campbell's in Jessica Campbell's text, about how you're able to wield the sort of powers of that language within that given context, and you're able to use it to even sort of critique the context itself, and to sort of challenge the context of itself and be critical of it. So you're aware of it. It's almost like you're not only within the discourse performing the language of the discourse, but you're also, I guess, like, in a sense, like, above that, and like able to sort of, I guess, separate yourself from the moment when you're in a discourse and you're performing the language of the discourse. You're able to separate yourself, and almost in a way of like your awareness is bringing you to a point where you're able to take note of what you're doing within that performance of the discourse, and what that may mean. Right. It's not just performing it, but it's being aware of the performance of it, and what the function of that is within that particular discourse. Right. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So this goes for any student, basic writing. So the issue becomes, then, since very clearly that any student, so the issue becomes then, so the issue isn't that students aren't able to think critically. Rather, it's very clear in fact, all students think critically. In fact, all students think critically. The issue then becomes, how do we make students understand the value of struggling with writing? I'm gonna turn that off. do we make students understand the value of struggling with writing? How do we make students understand the value of struggling? In an effort to them materialize their thoughts into writing. How do we make students understand the value of struggling with writing in an effort to have? Was it Cheryl Smith? She might have been the one that, yeah. So, as I mentioned, Cheryl Smith and Campbell kind of talk about this in a bit, and it's the idea of metacognition. And I think it speaks to also Guy's case, where talk about I think like a meta discourse is the way he puts it, and that you're able to see and understand that actually Cheryl Smith puts it pretty well, that you're able to right, they should think about their thinking. Yeah. So they're able to separate themselves from their own sort of like thoughts. It's almost like it's almost like it's almost like a diffusion between the self and one's thoughts, and you're able to see one's thoughts, and you're trying to make sense, and trying to understand what puts these thoughts together, and what are they trying to say, in that sort of sense. Yeah. So the issue then becomes, how do we make students understand the value of struggling with writing in an effort to have them materialize their thoughts into writing? Smith and Campbell both propose an answer to this. Smith and Campbell both propose an answer to this. Which I think propose an answer to this, which I think is very similar to one another. Smith in Smith's case, she offers teaching metacognition. offers teaching metacognition. Campbell offers that students need to become aware that they have a voice. Right. And I personally think that these two things are almost the same thing. You could argue they're not. I can see that, but I think in a way they mean the same thing in the way that Campbell tries to when she explains it. In a sense, these people who attain knowledge transforming processes of composition, they become aware that they have a voice, while the knowledge telling writers tend to not be aware of that, right? Although they're doing it, well, to some extent they might be doing it, but they're not aware that their voice, that they have a voice within what they're saying. And they're not aware, more importantly, they're not aware of the utility of that voice, and what its function is within what the context that it's being used for. But yeah, I think in that way they're sort of the same thing in the way that metacognition is thinking about your thoughts, and that what Campbell proposes also is kind of like being aware of that you have a voice. Metacognition is also like kind of being aware. I guess it's like a different way of putting like your thoughts into like either voice or like just thoughts themselves. But yeah, in Smith's case, she offers teaching metacognition, while Campbell offers that students need to become. Well, not that students need to become. I don't think she proposes that. Campbell sort of illustrates. Whoops. That students who demonstrate the students who demonstrate knowledge transforming. Mande. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Alright, where was I? Okay. Campbell illustrates that students who demonstrate knowledge transforming writing processes. Teaching metacognition, while Campbell illustrates that students who demonstrate knowledge transforming writing illustrates that students who practice knowledge transforming processes demonstrate students who practice knowledge transforming writing processes awareness of their voice. Of their voice. And its value within. And it's writing within composing. Writing. It seems to be that students who are classified as poor writers do not have an awareness of this voice as one that matters, as one that the process. Poor writers do not have an awareness of this voice as one that holds utility with it. One that holds utility within the process. How then can we start? How then can we as teachers introduce them? How then can we as teachers invite students to engage the context of discourse? Aware. And learn from it. How then can we as teachers invite students to engage with the context of a given discourse? Access. It seems to me that students who are classified as poor writers do not have an awareness of their voice as one's own utility within the process. To engage with the context. Be made aware of their function. made aware of the utility of their voice within it. I think partly of course, that students cannot be expected to immediately engage a specific discourse. Rather, they need to develop and mold their voice within the confines of a specific discourse. Metacognition especially through peer reviews. Here, students who already wield the language of discourse are able to guide the process of the person who has yet to wield language, particular space. Okay. I think I might be done. Alright, so the issue, okay, let me just read this over. Generally, the readings for this week have urged me to think about the ways in which schools have misunderstood the writing process. After last week's readings, I've kept thinking about how much we don't understand about the writing process. Largely, this is due to, as Moffat mentions, writing is a manifestation of thought. Of course, as he also mentions, I'm double-checking Moffat. Okay. I don't know if I spelled it correctly. Of course, as he also mentions, it is impossible to understand the teaching of writing in America if one does not realize that in one form or another, from first grade through graduate school, it serves mostly to test writing. In effect, the way we teach writing in classroom largely ignores the utility of writing as a tool that materializes thought. Rather, writing seems to be used as a way to test knowledge of the material within a given context, in this case classrooms, not to challenge or build on them to demonstrate understanding. This practice, as a result, seems to be responsible for the nature of bad writers. I think I want to start a new paragraph here. As Campbell, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Alright, sorry about that. Where was I? Okay. As Campbell notes, there are largely two processes for composition: knowledge telling and knowledge transforming. School, for the most part, reinforces the former rather than the latter. In my experience, at least, as I mentioned in my commentary last week, teachers treat writing as a way to have their ideas recorded by the student, when ideally we should, I think, have students write for their own sake. What I mean by this is that we should teach students to learn how to struggle with their thoughts in order to create meaning. When students begin to engage with the materials of the classroom, their thoughts struggle with the material that they are being exposed to. This goes for any student. As a Smith reading mentions, basic writing students aren't the only ones who have difficulty thinking. Students all across levels and disciplines struggle with the kind of thinking demanded for them in the college courses. So the issue isn't that students are able to think critically. In fact, all students think critically. The issue then becomes, how do we make students understand the value of struggling with writing in an effort to have them materialize their thoughts into writing? Starting a new paragraph though. Smith and Campbell both propose an answer to this, which I think is very similar to one another. In Smith's case, she offers to teach metacognition, while Campbell illustrates the students who practice knowledge transforming writing processes show an awareness of their voice. And so it's that students who practice knowledge transforming writing processes characteristically show an awareness of their voice and its value within composing writing. It seems to be that students who are classified as poor writers do not have an awareness of their voice as one that holds utility within the process. How then can we, as teachers, invite students to engage with within the context of a given discourse and make them aware of the utility of their voice within it? I think partly, of course, that students cannot be expected to immediately engage with a specific discourse. Rather, they need to develop and mold their voice within the confines of the specific discourse. Metacognition seems to find a solution for this, especially through peer reviews. Your students who already wield the language of the discourse are able to guide the process of this person who has yet to wield the language of the particular space. I think I'm good. Yeah, so normally I reread through what I've written a couple times, and by this point I just copy, paste, and then I post my writing. So yeah, let's do that. Where? Oh no, that's the other one. All right, so yeah. And then I just paste. And that's it. After this, what I end up doing for the after this, I'm gonna post my recordings, but I feel like I need to edit some stuff out because it's just like I'm not doing anything or saying anything. I just had to leave for a moment. After this, I come back later to do some responses. So yeah, this is the end of this recording.